Hello everybody! JGC Anime here today. We're to review the first season of Jujutsu Kaisen. So without further ado, let's just hop right into this. So what is the story behind Jujutsu Kaisen? Basically, this boy named Itadori ends up eating a cursed finger thing from a thing called the cursed spirit known as Sukuna, and now that he has this Sukuna guy inside of his body, he ends up teaming up with a bunch of people to try to take down spirits while also going to a high school, stuff like that. It's not really very easy to describe it in a few details, but basically he's just trained to become a sorcerer type person to go and slay cursed spirits. But yeah, that's not a very good description, but that's really just how the show just kind of starts. Just Itadori is in the school learning how to face cursed spirits while having this cursed spirit inside of him. But yeah, that's again not a great description, but we're just gonna roll with it. So in terms of spoiler-free thoughts on this show, I went into the show just saying here with the expectation that it was going to be similar to Demon Slayer, where I didn't really love it that much, but I didn't hate it. And so when I went into this, my expectations weren't super high, even though people keep praising it and saying it's one of the best shows ever. I went into it with the mindset of it'll probably just be okay. And after having sat down and watched it, okay, it was pretty good. It wasn't like the best show ever. However, I do understand why some people love this show because there are some really good elements here. I never found myself growing bored of the story. I did enjoy a lot of the character development from a bunch of different characters, as well as just the overall vibe. It has a much more enjoyable vibe than Demon Slayer does, which I'll probably end up comparing the two a few times this video. But basically, I was surprised to find that I never actually grew bored with it. I was just super into it. The comedy was hilarious. The fights, of course, as everyone says, are awesome, and just the overall vibe I really enjoyed. I thought the whole setup, despite having that normal shonen-esque setup, is quite unique in its own right because I haven't really seen too many shows with curses. I'm sure there's some that are out there that I just haven't seen yet, but this is one of the few shows I've really seen that has curses being a pretty prominent part of the story, and I really enjoy that aspect as all the different villains in the show have unique abilities and skills, and all the characters are powerful or weaker in their own right. I really enjoy how everything plays out and how pretty much all the characters in terms of like the main cast as well as side characters are likable or hateable because they're designed to be hateable. It's just, it fits everything I kind of wanted in a shonen show. Since I don't watch too many shonen like other people, I say that, but I have watched a few shonen shows. Like I watched a bit of Bleach. I haven't finished. I watched like 9 episodes and I never ended up continuing after that, but I also watched One Piece. You know, I've watched My Hero Academia. I've seen plenty of shonen shows in the past. However, when it comes to how much hype I was seeing for this show, I really thought it was going to be another case like Demon Slayer, where people kept saying, dude, it's so good, it's so awesome, it's the best show ever, and then I watch it and think, it's all right, it's fine. But I was pleasantly surprised to find, no, this actually was a pretty solid time. I actually really enjoyed it. All 24 episodes just blew by really quickly. I just kept watching. I had such a good time. I really enjoy all the characters, the different stories that are told. And while there is one episode in particular, just one episode that actually really got on my nerves, other than that one episode, the rest of the season was incredible. It was really entertaining. It was really freaking awesome. And I definitely see why people do like this show. It is very entertaining. And the story, while nothing too spectacular, like the best stories ever written, in terms of the story, it's actually better than what I thought was going to happen. I thought it was going to be one of the most bare bones stories, just the most uninteresting story that would just have good action pieces, but no, turns out there's actually a pretty solid story here, and I do find myself enjoying it a lot. But moving past that for now, some things I'd like to talk about without spoiling. I guess one of the first things would probably be some of the characters, like Itadori himself, the main character. He's actually a lot of fun. I really enjoy how a lot of the cast in this get to have their goofy moments, and I definitely find myself enjoying just all the different interactions we see in this show. Characters like Gojo, as everyone's talked about, is awesome. Nobara ended up being a character that I originally wasn't too sure about, but ended up becoming a really awesome character near the end with the big final part of this season. And also Fushiguro, who just like Nobara, also had a lot of good developments kind of near the end of the season. And I really do think that all of that main cast is really freaking interesting, especially with how they all get their own time on screen for the most part. While I do think that Nobara could have been a bit better in terms of like screen time, I do find myself interested in seeing how her as well as everyone else's story progresses later down the line. And just overall, I just really enjoyed the main cast, especially how the villains are the right amount of just absolutely crazy. Without going into spoilers, the villains in this season just sometimes they astound me. Like I can maybe describe why they can be kind of terrifying, but also just hateable in the spoiler section. I can talk about that, but they did some things in this season where I'm just like, did they really just do that? Okay, I guess that happened. Wow. Like, it truly catches me off guard sometimes. And I did find myself really freaking enjoying the villains on screen and how they do feel like a threat that Itadori and team will have to deal with. It's really interesting, and yeah. Some other things I'd like to talk about, I guess, would be the comedy. Now, normally when I watch shows with a lot of action and stuff like that, comedy really isn't something that I really register. I never really think about it. But this show had a lot of moments where they actually got a really good laugh out of me. Like, there's this little, I'm sure people know what I'm talking about, but there's this little section near the end of one of the episodes. I think they're called like Juju Strolls. And basically what happened to that is Itadori ends up running over to Nobara and Gojo and tells them about how Fushiguro is getting hit on. And then they just mess with him and embarrass him, trying to stop him from getting hit on, which I won't go into any more details about that, but basically it is such a freaking hilarious clip, and it was fun. They really do make me laugh sometimes, and I do find that the character interactions are what really get me to laugh, and the comedy is just really strong. I do think the comedy in this show is really freaking good, and I liked it a lot. It was funny, but yeah. There's not really much else I could say, so we're just gonna hop into the spoilers section now. Here's a timestamp for the spoilers. If you haven't seen the show, I recommend sticking around here my thoughts, but you haven't, just skip to the end so you'll get spoilers. But yeah, if you have seen it, I recommend sticking around here my thoughts. So yeah, we're gonna catch up for 5 and I'm going to enter the spoiler section. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So going over some of the other characters, the first one I want to talk about is Sukuna. Sukuna is a character that I honestly was really expecting more out of in this season than actually happened. I mean, for what he does on screen, he's awesome. Sure, he's also freaking terrifying, but he's awesome. Like, in the beginning, when he ends up getting full control of Itadori for a bit and says how he's gonna go on a killing spree and stuff like that, only for Itadori to kind of pull back at the last minute and end up dying because, Sukuna ripped out his heart for a bit. There's moments like that where you just think, wow, Sukuna was really a threatening villain, especially with how after the whole thing happens where he ends up killing Itadori for a bit, after that, he ends up making a deal with Itadori. It says about how he'll do this and that and all that other stuff. And then after that, Itadori's just like, no, you can't do that. I'm only going back without any terms attached. And he's like, all right, I'll let that happen if you beat me in a fight. And then Itadori's like, yeah, I'll do that. And then he just immediately gets his head cut halfway off. And it's just stuff like that reminds me, oh yeah, Sukuna is literally probably one of the most dangerous people to deal with in this show. And he's awesome. Gojo, of course, is awesome, especially when he shows off domain expansion. Like, I want to talk about that in a little bit because it's awesome. But basically, Gojo, of course, I understand the hype around it now. Gojo is pretty freaking awesome for what screen time he has in this season. The villains, for the most part, which I guess we talk about now, are just the right amount of hateable. Like, one of them, known as Jogo, literally just lights a whole restaurant on fire, like killing everybody inside except one dude who had the right instincts to get out of there, but everyone else just burst into flames. And I just thought, did they really just do that? Did they really just have this guy blow up everybody into flames? Did they really do that? Like, there are some shocking moments with some of the villains here, like how also there's another villain called Mahito who literally just reforms 3 different guys' faces until they were dead. And it's just because it's his ability. He's able to manipulate the soul, and that stuff's terrifying, but also kind of awesome. Just the villains really fit that role of you want to hate them, and you absolutely do. You absolutely freaking hate them, but at the same time, you could tell they're a threat and won't be dealt with easily. It's awesome how hateable the villains can be in this story. They really do show how strong these guys are and how much of an annoying threat they can be. But yeah, moving past that, I guess I want to talk about the big kind of elephant in the room that I want to talk about, and that is the episode I consider to be the worst episode of this season. And that, sadly, has to go to episode 12. Basically, what was happening with episode 12 and the episodes before it is just a bunch of stuff that was leading up towards this big fight between Itadori and this guy named Junpei, where it was building up this whole thing where Junpei he suffers from bullying, and because of that, Mahito took advantage of him to have a bit of fun. And the story up to episode 12 was actually really good, about how Itadori ended up interacting with Junpei, and it really felt like there was a connection forming between Junpei and Itadori. But then we get to episode 12, where it seems like the culmination of everything that Junpei has been through after losing his mom, because it turns out that Mahito ended up planting one of Sukuna's fingers, because Sukuna has like 20 fingers that Itadori has to eat. Basically, Mahito sets that up inside of Junpei's house and gets his mother killed and blames it on the people at Junpei's school that were bullying him, basically the kids there that were bullying him. And originally it was super interesting, especially how it created like this barrier, and it looked like things were really intense because Junpei was gonna get back at all of his bullies. But then From what feels like just kind of out of nowhere, Itadori shows up in the school, and then it's revealed in episode 12 that, oh yeah, Itadori heard about how a barrier was set up, so he went over to check it out, which would make more sense if, you know, if they specified how much time it was really taking to do everything. Because from my perspective when watching, it seemed like Junpei was just immediately taking action after the barrier was set up. So how did Itadori get there so fast? Did he just kind of happen to be nearby? Well, no, he was in some kind of other building. Was the building nearby? I don't know. And there's just a bunch of other aspects to it as well. Like, not even just that aspect where Itadori arrives and confronts Junpei. Basically, after that, then we just cut. We cut away from the gym where Junpei and Itadori were. We just cut away from that, and then it turns out now we're fighting in a hallway in the school. How did we get there? And also, we barely really go into detail about how Junpei can now control this cursed spirit thing, and while we do later learn why it doesn't affect Itadori, it still makes us wonder, what is happening right now? What the frick is happening? And it confuses me so much, and it made me so mad because it felt like the stakes just weren't there. They weren't ever feeling like, oh yeah, this is a big epic showdown. Like, it felt more like okay, what the frick is happening now? What is happening? It felt like they were just trying to rush to the end. And then later on, when Nanami shows up, another character who was working with Itadori then says to him, oh yeah, 2 people died, which we know one of them was Junpei after Mahito turned on him, but then who was the other person? If Itadori was saying 2 people were dead, who was the other freaking person? What? What are you talking about? Who's this other person? How did you guys go from a gym to the school? Where did things lead? How did we get to this point? And that is what annoyed the heck out of me this episode. Granted, the next episode, episode 13, was a lot better and it ended up getting me back into the story. But for that one episode, I was just so baffled. I was just like, what the frick is happening? How did things get to this point? What was going on? That is just how I felt with that one episode. But other than that one episode, which I just have a lot of gripes with, the rest of the season's great. That is just one episode where the only real highlight of that is when Itadori, after Junpei's death, literally responds to that with basically after Sukuna refuses to heal Junpei, he looks at Mahito and just says, I will kill you, or something like that. And that would be awesome if the build up to it didn't feel so awkward. That's probably just for me. I'm probably the only one who's affected by this, but I felt the build up to that moment would have been so much better if it was fleshed out just a little bit more, a little more built up. It just, as awesome of a moment as that was, the overall vibe just didn't fit with it. And I don't know, that's just me. That's my only real major gripe, other than them deciding to troll us in the opening theme where it literally ends showing Junpei and Itadori hanging out with what looked to be like their school uniforms. It looks like Junpei was gonna join the sorcerer school, only to turn out, nope, turns out that he's dead. Junpei's dead now, which caught me off guard. And I just thought, you really trolled me with this? Which it was more funny than annoying. It was just kind of funny how they basically troll you saying, oh yeah, he's gonna join the school. Wait, no, never mind. He's dead. He's dead now. Well, dang. But yeah. Anyways, that's my only, the episode 12 was my only real gripe with this season because the rest of it is so freaking good. Like, as I said, episode 13 went back to just being awesome again with the Nanami and Itadori fight against Mahito. And I really think that there are a lot of really good elements here, such as domain expansion. I want to get back on this. Domain expansion, with how rarely it shows up. In fact, I'm pretty sure in this one season it only shows up like maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 at most times. It is freaking awesome. Like, I think domain expansion is so freaking cool. I love how it plays out and how we get to see the different types of domain expansions, from Sukuna's to Gojo's to Fushiguro's. Just all these different domain expansions are so cool. And I would love to see more of them in season 2. It's so good. I love them a lot. They're really cool. And whenever they come on screen, I always find myself getting super hyped. Just with so many different unique ones, like how with Sukuna's, it literally just cuts people up because while he sits on a throne, and with Gojo, it's literally basically like you're kind of just in this empty void, and Gojo could just appear behind you and, you know, just rip your head off, like what he did with one of the cursed spirits, that being Jogo. But there's moments like that truly shine in this, and I really like them. But we haven't even talked about probably one of the biggest elephants in the room, and that is the whole thing where the 2 different schools join together, where basically one school, the one that our team is at, is going up against another school, where it's normally for second years. However, the first years from our school will be joining in on this one, meaning Itadori, Fushiguro, and Nobara would all be helping out. And this also introduced us to all of the different side characters, and each and every one of them is great. Panda is great, Maki is great, Inumaki is great. They're just all really freaking great, and I do think that the second years add a lot to this, even though they're really only in this one specific arc of the story. After this, they kind of just take a back seat to focus back on our main team, getting another one of Sukuna's fingers. But they were awesome, and even some of the other characters like Miwa and Todo, as well as Mai, just those three are definitely the big standouts of the students from the other school, but there's also other characters that stand out, such as Kokichi, who has a little bit of a fight against Panda, which was super freaking awesome, as well as Noritoshi, who has a pretty interesting fight against Fushiguro. I definitely really enjoyed seeing all these characters just stand out, but out of all of them, I think the one that definitely stands out the most and is absolutely just one of my favorite characters in the first season definitely has to be Todo, who, after learning that Itadori has the exact same preferences as him, ends up treating him like a brother. And dude, their duo is the best part of the show. I'm saying it right now. I love this duo. They are both so freaking funny, and they're just so much fun, especially when they go against Hanami, who learns how to love fighting during the whole school thing, where they end up just wrecking everything, which was super freaking awesome to watch. But basically, there are so many amazing elements to this show. All the different characters and stories are so good. And there's one thing that definitely stands out that I super appreciate that I want to talk about here, and that is how long the fights go on for. Now, as I mentioned before, I want to compare this to Demon Slayer, where in Demon Slayer, they'll end up dragging out the fight scenes for the entire season. Not just like 1 or 2 episodes, maybe 3 episodes, or sometimes 4. They'll drag it out for like 6 to 8 episodes. Like, they'll drag those fights out like incredibly long. And it's just, it gets a bit annoying after a while. Like, I have talked about this in my Demon Slayer reviews, but I always hate how freaking long some of these fight scenes are, since everything before those fight scenes are usually super interesting. But once we get into the fight scenes themselves, they just kind of start to make me lose interest because they just drag on for so freaking long. But in Jujutsu Kaisen's case, it's actually way better. The pacing never really goes that far. At most, it'll go on for 5 to 6 episodes, but not in the like, that's the norm. It's more of the exception. More often than not, it's maybe 3 to 4 episodes, but they never drag out fight scenes. And whenever they do finish a fight scene, they'll pop out to the next one. Like I mentioned that Panda has a fight scene in this where he ends up going against Kokechi, and it's a very simple fight. It's only about an episode long, and then we move on to the next fight. Like, they don't just try to drag out with them as many fights as possible. They try to keep the story moving. They understand that, oh yeah, we probably shouldn't focus on one fight for too long and just drag it out with flashbacks and backstories. They know that we're there to just keep moving and enjoy the story. And I really do freaking appreciate that. I really enjoy how they take the story in a very nice direction where it never feels rushed. It feels like it's just constantly pacing itself well. And I really freaking appreciate that, which may sound like a stupid thing to complain about for Demon Slayer compared to this show, but I really love how they never try to make you waste too much time on one particular fight in this show. But yeah, one more thing I like to talk about that is a bit more of a negative has to be the fact that in the season, we learned that Sukuna makes a deal with Itadori, and I thought that deal was going to come into play at some point. It never does. It will probably be something that happens later down the line, but in this season, it never ends up coming to play, which is a bit disappointing. But that's not a massive negative. It's just a bit disappointing that we never got to see anything from that in this season, but we'll probably see it at some point in the future. But yeah, if I were to talk about one last thing that I actually really liked about this show, it's the fact of the whole thing with Itadori and his little death. Basically, early on, Itadori nearly dies after Sukuna rips his heart out, as I mentioned earlier. And rather than just immediately coming back to everyone after his death, his quote-unquote death, instead, he ends up taking time to be personally trained by Gojo and ends up going on this whole thing with Junpei and stuff like that. And I actually really like that. I found the fact that he got to go on his own little side arc really helped build up Itadori's character and helped him change and grow as a person. I really do like the fact that they included that, because if they just had him immediately go back to his friends, it would have been like a, okay type situation where I wouldn't really feel too much and just be like, oh cool, he's back now, that's kind of funny, let's go. But instead it's more of an, okay, he's been through a lot, but he's back now, so I'm glad he's back. And it's just, it definitely handles it in a way that I really appreciate, since it doesn't feel like everything's just automatically back to the main group. Sometimes a story could just be about Itadori and still hold a lot of heart. But yeah, that's all I have to say. So we're at the conclusion of this video. What are my final thoughts? Overall, I really enjoyed Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1. I thought there was a lot of charm here, a lot of great moments with the animation. Despite the story being very simple in terms of the overall concept, it was really freaking good in its execution, and I definitely see why so many people really enjoy this show. I wouldn't say it's perfect. After all, as I said in the beginning, episode 12 of this season was probably one of the worst episodes of the show, and it really just does not hit me the same way it probably hit a lot of other people. But still, overall, the season flew by in the blink of an eye. I really did enjoy it. All the characters are either likable or dislikable depending on what you're supposed to aim for. They do a really good job aiming you in the direction that they're trying to go for. And I do think that with all the characters, I really appreciate how each one has the time and dedication they need. They know how long to spend with them. They know how long to move on. And just overall, the vibe I get from this is that it's just a really fun show, a really entertaining show. And that's why I give Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1 an 8 out of 10. Fairly enjoyable. It really was entertaining, and I could see why so many people like it, and it's just a lot of fun. It was really a lot of freaking fun, and I would happily pop into both the movie as well as season 2 in the near future, since it was just really, really good. And yeah, that's all I really have to say, and thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe. I was going to anime fans to the channel, and I will see you all around. Peace!